The night was cold, and the street was almost empty. Neon lights flickered above the small shops, and the smell of rain mixed with the city's dust. Daniel, a young man working late shifts, walked home through the narrow alley as he always did. He carried a small backpack and listened to the sound of dripping water from broken pipes. It was just another normal night, or at least he thought so. As he passed by the row of dumpsters near the corner, he heard a faint noise. It was soft, almost like a whimper. Daniel stopped and turned his head, wondering if it was a cat or maybe a dog searching for food. But the sound was different. It was fragile, like someone trying not to cry. He felt a strange pull in his chest, a curiosity he could not ignore. He stepped closer to the large green dumpster, the smell of old trash heavy in the air. The noise stopped suddenly, and the silence felt heavy. Daniel hesitated, his hand hovering above the lid, his mind telling him to leave. But something in his heart pushed him to look. He slowly lifted the lid, his breath catching in his throat. Inside, crouched in the corner, was a girl unlike any he had ever seen. Her skin glowed faintly in the darkness, almost silver under the dim alley light. Her hair was tangled but shimmered as if it held threads of light. Her large eyes, glowing faint blue, widened in fear when she saw him. She looked fragile, weak, and scared. Daniel froze, his heart pounding in his chest. This was no ordinary girl. She was something else, something not from this world. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The girl pressed herself against the corner, her arms wrapped tightly around her knees. She shook her head slowly, as if begging him not to come closer. Daniel raised his hands carefully, showing he meant no harm. "It's okay," he whispered, his voice calm, though his body trembled. "I won't hurt you," he added. The girl's breathing was fast, shallow, as if she had been running for hours. Her clothes were torn, her skin marked with bruises. Daniel noticed she was shivering, and his heart ached at the sight. This was no monster, no threat, but a scared being trying to survive. He lowered the lid halfway, leaving it open so she could still see him. His mind raced with questions. Who was she? Where did she come from? Why was she hiding here? He stepped back slowly, giving her space. She blinked, surprised by his action. Daniel reached into his backpack and pulled out a half-empty water bottle. He placed it gently on the ground a few steps away from the dumpster. Then he pulled out a wrapped sandwich he had saved from work. He laid it beside the bottle and stepped back again. His hands were still raised, his eyes calm, waiting. For a while, she only stared at him, her glowing eyes filled with suspicion. Daniel stood silently, the cold wind brushing against his face. Finally, the girl's trembling hand reached out slowly from the dumpster. She grabbed the bottle first, opening it carefully. The water slipped past her lips, and Daniel saw her throat move as she swallowed greedily. Her eyes softened just a little, though her body still shook with fear. She then reached for the sandwich, sniffing it cautiously. Her stomach growled loudly, betraying her hunger. With shaky fingers, she unwrapped it and took a small bite. For the first time, Daniel saw something other than fear in her eyes. It was confusion, surprise, maybe even a hint of hope. Daniel smiled gently, though he kept his distance. "There you go," he said softly. "It's yours." The girl looked at him, her lips parting as if she wanted to speak. But no words came, only a small sound, almost like a whisper. Her voice was broken, weak, but filled with pain. She quickly pulled her knees close again, hiding her face. Daniel stood there, unsure what to do next. He wanted to help, but he also knew this was dangerous. Whoever she was, wherever she came from, she did not belong here. And if she was hiding, it meant someone or something was looking for her. The thought made his chest tighten. But he couldn't just walk away, not after seeing her like this. The rain started again, droplets tapping on the metal lid. The alley grew darker, shadows stretching across the walls. Daniel looked around nervously, feeling the weight of the night. He knew one thing clearly: his life had just changed forever. And it all began with the discovery of the strange alien girl hiding in a dumpster. The alley was silent except for the steady sound of rain. Daniel stood there with his hands slightly trembling, his eyes fixed on the strange girl inside the dumpster. She clutched the sandwich tightly, as if it was the only thing keeping her alive. Her glowing eyes darted left and right, watching every shadow, every flicker of light. It was not only fear of him, Daniel realized, it was fear of something bigger, something chasing her. Daniel took a careful step backward, trying not to scare her more. "I'm not going to hurt you," he whispered again, though his words seemed too small for the heavy silence. The girl shrank further into the corner, her knees pulled up to her chest, her thin arms wrapped tightly around them. Her whole body shook, not just from cold, but from something deeper. This was fear that came from suffering, from running, from losing everything. Daniel felt his heart squeeze inside his chest. He had seen fear before in people, in animals, but never like this. This was the kind of fear that made someone forget how to trust. She looked at him like he was another danger, another predator waiting for the right moment. But he stayed still, showing no sign of threat, only patience. Minutes passed, though to Daniel they felt like hours. The girl slowly drank the last of the water, her hands shaking so much that a few drops spilled down her chin. She wiped them quickly, her glowing eyes flashing with panic, as if even wasting water was dangerous. Daniel noticed small cuts on her arms, bruises on her legs, and a faint burn mark near her neck. Someone had hurt her, someone had treated her like she was not alive, not human, not even worthy of kindness. The thought made anger burn inside him. He wanted to ask who had done this, but he knew she would not answer yet. She did not trust him, not fully, not now. And maybe not for a long time. Daniel crouched down a few feet away, his body low to the ground to look less threatening. He placed his backpack on the wet pavement and slid it forward slowly. "I'll leave this here," he said softly, his voice almost carried away by the rain. Inside the bag were a few things: another bottle of water, a spare hoodie, and some snacks. He kept nothing hidden, no tricks, only offerings of peace. The girl stared at the bag, her glowing eyes flicking between it and him. She made no move, her small body still curled up tight. Dana did not push, he only nodded. "You can take it when I'm gone," he whispered. Her lips parted slightly, as if she wanted to speak, but then she closed them, biting down hard. Her silence was not only fear, it was survival. Words, Daniel realized, might have cost her too much in the past. Maybe speaking had brought her pain. Maybe it had given her away. The rain fell harder, dripping down Daniel's face, soaking his clothes. Still, he did not move away. Something deep inside told him this moment mattered, that if he left too soon, the fragile thread of trust might snap forever. So he waited in silence, letting her see that he was not rushing, not forcing her. A sudden sound broke the quiet, a sharp humming in the distance. The girl's head snapped up, her glowing eyes wide with terror. Her body went rigid, and she pressed herself deeper into the metal walls of the dumpster. Daniel frowned and turned his head, hearing it too now. It was mechanical, steady like a drone flying overhead. The hum grew louder for a moment, then faded into the night sky. But the damage was done. The girl's breathing quickened, sharp and shallow, her panic returning full force. Daniel lifted his hands again. "It's gone," he whispered quickly. "You're safe for now." But she shook her head violently, her eyes brimming with tears. Her lips trembled as she finally let out a broken sound. Not words, but a soft, painful cry. Daniel's chest tightened, the sound cutting straight through him. Whatever she had escaped from, it was still out there, still hunting. And she knew it would not stop. She buried her face in her knees, hiding again, her shoulders trembling with silent sobs. Daniel sat there, watching helplessly, his heart heavy. He wanted to protect her, to tell her it would be okay. But how could he promise something when he didn't even know what she was running from? Still, he whispered softly, almost like a prayer, "You don't have to be afraid of me." The girl did not answer, but her sobs grew quieter. Her breathing slowed, just a little, as if his words had reached some hidden corner of her heart. Daniel stayed by the dumpster until the rain finally eased. The city was silent again, but now the silence was heavier. It was filled with unspoken fear, with questions that had no answers yet. When Daniel finally stood up, his legs stiff and his body cold, he looked at her one last time. She was still curled up, but her eyes peeked through her tangled hair, watching him, not with trust, not yet, but with something new, something that told him she was beginning to see he was different, that maybe, just maybe, this human would not hurt her. The night carried on, but Daniel knew his life would never be the same again. Because in the silent fear of an alien girl hiding in a dumpster, a fragile bond had just begun. The city lights faded as the night grew deeper. Daniel stayed awake in his small apartment, the sound of rain still echoing in his ears. His mind kept replaying the image of the alien girl crouched in the dumpster, her glowing eyes filled with fear. He had left his backpack for her, but when he turned back once from the end of the alley, he thought he saw her reaching for it. That small act gave him hope, a fragile hope that she might begin to trust him. Daniel could not sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he imagined the hum of the strange machine that had passed above them. He felt sure it was connected to her, that someone or something was searching for her, and if they found her, they would not be merciful. He pressed his hands against his face and sighed, knowing he had a choice to make. Walk away, pretend none of this happened, or risk everything to protect her. His heart already knew the answer. The next night, Daniel returned to the alley. The dumpster was still there, the shadows still deep. He approached slowly, his steps quiet. The lid was half open, and inside he saw movement. She was still there, still hiding, but this time something was different. She was wearing his hoodie, the one he had left inside the backpack. It looked too big on her small frame, but it covered her torn clothes. Her glowing eyes watched him carefully as he stepped closer. She did not shrink away this time, though her body remained tense. Daniel stopped a few feet away, giving her the space she needed. "I came back," he whispered, "to see if you're okay." The girl tilted her head slightly, her long tangled hair falling over her face. She held the empty water bottle in her hands, as if unsure what to do with it. Daniel slowly extended another one he had brought, placing it on the ground. Then he sat down on the cold pavement, making himself smaller, less threatening. They stared at each other, the silence between them heavy, but not as sharp as before. After a long pause, the girl finally spoke, her voice cracked and soft. "Why?" she whispered, the word almost lost in the air. Daniel blinked, surprised to hear her voice. "Why? Help me," she added, struggling to shape the words. Her accent was strange, broken, but her meaning was clear. Daniel's heart ached at the question. He did not know how to explain, not in a way she would believe. Because she was hurt, because she was alone, because no one deserved to live in fear like that. But he kept it simple, his voice steady. "Because you needed it," he said, "and because you don't deserve to suffer." The girl's eyes flickered with something new, something fragile. She looked down at the bottle, her trembling fingers twisting the cap. For the first time, she drank while he was still there. It was a small act, but to Daniel it felt like a door opening, even if only a little. Suddenly, a sharp sound echoed from the far end of the alley. The girl gasped and pulled back instantly, her eyes glowing brighter in panic. Daniel turned quickly, his chest tightening. Two figures in dark coats walked slowly across the street, their heads turning as if scanning the area. He grabbed the edge of the dumpster and whispered quickly, "Stay quiet, stay down." The girl obeyed, curling herself into the corner, her breath sharp and fast. Daniel stood casually near the wall, pretending to light a cigarette. The figures paused, their strange devices humming faintly. For a moment, Daniel thought they would come closer, but then they moved on, disappearing into the shadows. When they were gone, he let out a shaky breath and looked back inside the dumpster. Her glowing eyes were wide with fear, but also with confusion. He had protected her, even though it put him at risk. Daniel leaned closer, whispering gently, You see, not everyone wants to hurt you. The girl stared at him, silent, but her hands loosened their grip around her knees. She did not speak again, but she did not hide her face anymore. Something inside her was beginning to change. The first spark of trust had been lit, fragile but real. The night grew colder, but Daniel stayed. They sat in silence, but it was not the same silence as before. This silence was softer, filled with possibility. And in the darkness of that alley, two very different lives began to move closer. Neither knew what dangers still waited in the shadows. But one thing was certain. For the first time, the alien girl was no longer completely alone. The following nights passed in a strange rhythm. Daniel kept returning to the alley, always carrying food and water, sometimes even blankets. The alien girl, though still guarded, began to accept his presence more. She no longer shrank away when he approached, and sometimes her glowing eyes followed him with curiosity instead of fear. It was progress, slow but steady, and Daniel knew every small step mattered. One night, as the city lights flickered weakly above them, the girl finally spoke again. Her voice was quiet, broken, but there was strength hidden inside it. "My name," she whispered, her lips trembling as she formed the words. "Lyra," she said, as if giving away something precious. Daniel repeated it softly, "Lyra," letting the name settle in the cold air. She looked at him, her eyes narrowing slightly, testing him. But when he smiled gently, she did not look away. Lyra still spoke in fragments, her words heavy with an accent not from earth. But Daniel listened with patience, never rushing, never pushing too hard. And slowly, like a locked door opening, her secrets began to spill out. She told him she was not meant to be here. Her people were travelers, explorers who crossed through the stars. They had come close to Earth by mistake, and their small vessel was damaged. She had been separated from the others, pulled down to the planet alone. But instead of help, she had been captured. Her glowing eyes darkened as she spoke, her hands curling into fists. "Humans, cages, pain," she whispered, shivering as if the memories burned her even now. Daniel felt a cold anger in his chest. He wanted to deny it, to say not all humans would do that. But he could see the scars on her skin, faint burns and bruises that told the truth. Whoever had taken her had treated her as less than alive. Like an experiment, not a person. She had escaped, barely, and had been hiding ever since. The dumpster was not a home, but it was the only place that gave her cover from the hunters. Daniel clenched his fists, his heart heavy with shame for what his kind had done. But he forced his voice to stay calm, gentle. "Not everyone is like that," he said. "You met me." Lyra's glowing eyes softened for a moment, though doubts still lingered. "Yes," she whispered, "you different." She told him about the humming machines, the drones that searched the skies at night. They were trackers, built to follow her energy, to hunt her down. She could not stay in one place too long, or they would find her again. Her body shook as she admitted how close they had come many times. Every day, every hour was survival, nothing more. Daniel listened in silence, his chest tight. She had been through more pain than he could imagine. Yet she was still alive, still fighting, even while trembling in fear. There was a strength in her that he could not ignore. And in that moment, he realized something else. She had trusted him enough to tell him this, to reveal her truth. That meant more than anything. "Lyra," he said softly, "I promise I won't let them take you again." The words left his mouth before he even thought them through. She looked at him with wide eyes, searching for lies. But she found none, only the steady fire in his voice. Her lips parted, and for the first time, he saw the faintest curve of a smile. It was small, fragile, but it was there. Still, Lyra's fear was not gone. She flinched at every sound. Her glowing eyes darted at every shadow. But now, when Daniel reached out his hand slowly, she did not pull away. She let his fingers brush hers, a touch so light it felt like it could vanish with the wind. To Daniel, it was proof that the wall between them was breaking. That night, as the rain tapped softly on the metal around them, Lyra spoke words that sent a chill through Daniel. "They will not stop," she said, her voice low. "They want what I carry." Daniel frowned, confused. "What do you mean?" Her glowing eyes locked onto his, filled with a heavy truth. "My kind inside me, there is power, something humans cannot have." She touched her chest gently, her hand trembling. "It can change worlds," she whispered, "and they want it, no matter the cost." Daniel sat frozen, the weight of her words sinking deep. She was not only an alien girl hiding from fear. She was carrying something greater, something dangerous. And the hunters chasing her would never give up. He looked at her, his heart pounding. Her trust in him had revealed the secret. And now he knew protecting her was not just about kindness. It was about something far bigger than himself. Something that could change the fate of two worlds. The night air was heavy, and Daniel could not shake the weight of Lyra's words. She was not only running from hunters, she carried something inside her that could change worlds. He sat across from her in the dim alley, the flickering streetlight above casting shadows on her silver-toned skin. Her glowing eyes stayed locked on him, waiting for his reaction. Daniel's chest rose and fell, his mind racing, but his voice came out calm. "I don't care what power you have," he said. "I just care that you're safe." Lyra blinked, her lips parting slightly. No one had ever said such words to her, not since she had fallen to this planet. She searched his face for deception, for the cruelty she had learned to expect. But all she found was sincerity. For a long moment, silence stretched between them. And then, slowly, she reached out her hand, trembling, uncertain. Her delicate fingers brushed against his, and she did not pull away. The touch was brief, but to Daniel it felt like fire sparking in the cold night. A connection, fragile yet real, had formed between them. Lyra's eyes softened, and for the first time, she did not look like prey. She looked like someone daring to believe and trust. Daniel gave her the spare blanket he had carried. She wrapped it around her small frame, pulling it close. The simple warmth brought a sigh from her lips, a sound that cut through the fear for a moment. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice quiet but clear. Daniel smiled. "You don't have to thank me," he said. "You deserve this and more." For the next hour, they spoke in fragments. Her broken English mixed with strange alien words. She told him bits about her people, how they were wanderers, seekers of knowledge, how they did not conquer, but learned, shared, and moved on. But she also spoke of betrayal, of humans who had taken her. They had not seen her as a person, but as an object, a vessel for power. Daniel listened, anger simmering in his chest. Yet every time he looked at her, he forced himself to remain calm. She needed peace, not rage. At one point, Daniel reached into his backpack and pulled out a small notebook. He sketched simple drawings to help bridge the gaps in language. A house, a tree, the sun. Lyra tilted her head, watching him with growing curiosity. Then she took the pencil, her hand shaking slightly. On the page, she drew something strange, a circle surrounded by stars, with a smaller mark inside. Daniel stared at it, not fully understanding. She tapped her chest, then the symbol. "This," she said softly, "is what they want." Daniel swallowed hard, realizing again the danger she carried. But instead of fear, he placed his hand gently on the page, covering the drawing. "They can't have it," he said firmly. Lyra's eyes widened, shimmering faintly with something close to relief. For the first time since meeting her, Daniel heard a sound that was not fear, not sorrow. It was small, fragile, but unmistakable. A laugh. Lyra's lips curved slightly, her glowing eyes softer than ever before. It faded quickly, but it was enough. Enough to tell Daniel that the walls around her heart were beginning to fall. The moment did not last long. A distant hum rose again in the sky, the sound of searching drones. Lyra stiffened instantly, the blanket falling from her shoulders as her body tensed. Daniel placed a hand on the dumpster wall, leaning close, whispering, "They won't find you, not tonight." She looked at him, her glowing eyes wide, filled with fear and hope at the same time. And then, for the first time, she moved closer on her own, her small hand gripping his arm tightly. Her trust was not in words, but in the simple act of reaching for him when the darkness grew louder. Daniel felt her trembling against him, and he swore silently in his heart. Whatever it took, he would protect her, not just because of the secret she carried, but because she was more than that. She was alive, fragile, and brave. And in the bond forming between them, Daniel saw a truth he could not ignore. Sometimes the smallest act of trust could change everything. The drones passed overhead, their lights fading into the distance. The alley was quiet once again. Daniel stayed by her side until her breathing slowed, until the trembling in her hands eased. In the stillness, under the watch of the dim streetlight, Lyra finally whispered words that would stay with him forever. "You are not like the others," she said, her voice weak but certain. Daniel smiled gently, his hand resting near hers. "Neither are you," he replied. And in that fragile moment, surrounded by shadows and fear, a bond was sealed, one that neither hunters nor secrets could break. Because the alien girl who had once trusted no one had found one human she could finally believe in. The city never truly slept, but that night felt different. The air was heavier, the shadows deeper, and Daniel's instinct screamed that danger was near. He had grown used to the hum of the distant drones, but this time the sound was closer, sharper, more deliberate. Lyra sat against the cold wall, her glowing eyes wide, her body tense like a cornered animal. Her hand clutched his arm tightly, and Daniel felt her tremble through the fabric of his jacket. Then it came, a beam of pale blue light sweeping across the alley. Daniel froze, pulling Lyra down low, his breath sharp in his chest. The drone hovered above the dumpsters, its strange lens shifting as if smelling the air. It was searching, hunting, and Daniel knew it was for her. He grabbed her hand and whispered, "We need to move now." Lyra hesitated, fear locking her in place. But Daniel pulled her gently yet firmly, urging her to follow. They slipped through the narrow alley, their footsteps splashing in shallow puddles. Behind them, the drone let out a sharp mechanical whine. Its light shot forward, catching the corner where they had been seconds earlier. Daniel led her through twisting streets, moving faster than he thought possible. The city's lights blurred around them, neon signs glowing in the wet night. Every corner felt dangerous. Every shadow felt alive. Lyra struggled to keep up, her body weak, but she pushed herself, trusting him. Her glowing eyes flickered with panic, but also with determination. More drones joined, their humming filling the night like a swarm. Daniel cursed under his breath, his heart pounding in his chest. They ducked into an abandoned building, the cracked glass doors barely holding on their hinges. Inside, dust and silence greeted them, broken only by the faint echo of their footsteps. Daniel pulled her behind a stack of fallen boards, motioning for her to stay quiet. They crouched together in the darkness, Daniel's arm shielding her. The blue glow of the drones seeped through the broken windows, moving like restless predators. Lyra's breathing was quick, but she pressed her hand over her mouth, forcing herself silent. Daniel felt the tremor of her body against his, and he whispered softly, "I won't let them take you." His words were steady, even though his heart raced wildly. Minutes stretched like hours as the machines scanned the building. At one point, a drone hovered so close that its light washed across their hiding place. Daniel held his breath, every muscle frozen. Lyra squeezed her eyes shut, her glowing lashes trembling. Then, as quickly as it came, the light shifted away. The drones moved on, their humming fading into the distance. Daniel exhaled, his body collapsing slightly with relief. But the danger was not over. From the far side of the building, two men in dark coats appeared. They carried strange devices that crackled faintly with energy. Lyra gasped softly, her whole body recoiling at the sight. Daniel gritted his teeth, pulling her back deeper into the shadows. The men spoke in low voices, words Daniel couldn't hear. But their posture was clear. They were hunting, relentless, patient. One of them scanned the floor with his device, a blue glow sweeping the dusty ground. Daniel knew if they kept searching, they would find the faint trail of their footsteps. He looked at Lyra, her eyes filled with terror, and he made a choice. He stood up, slowly at first, then moved away from her. He picked up a broken pipe from the ground and hurled it toward the far side of the hall. The sound of metal clanging echoed through the building. The men snapped their heads toward the noise, rushing in that direction. Daniel wasted no time. He grabbed Lyra's hand and whispered urgently, "Run." They sprinted out the back of the building, their feet pounding against the cracked pavement. The night air hit them hard, cold, and sharp. Behind them, the shouts of the hunters grew louder, the chase beginning anew. Lyra stumbled, but Daniel pulled her up, refusing to let her fall. Her glowing eyes burned with fear, but she kept running, her trust in him absolute. Through alleys, across empty streets, past the ruins of forgotten shops, they fled. Everywhere they turned, the hunters were close, their machines scanning the night. But Daniel never let go of her hand, not once. His strength carried her forward, his determination shielding her like armor. He did not know where this path would end, but he knew one thing for certain. He would not stop, not until she was safe. As they vanished into the deeper darkness of the city, the hunters slowed. They scanned and searched, but the two figures had slipped into the maze. Daniel pulled Lyra into a narrow passage between two tall buildings. They pressed against the wall, their breaths heavy, their hearts racing. For a moment, the world was silent again. Lyra leaned against him, her glowing eyes shimmering with tears. "You protect me," she whispered, her voice trembling but full of wonder. Daniel nodded, his chest rising and falling with exhaustion. "Always," he replied softly. "I promised, didn't I?" And in the stillness of that hidden passage, as danger stalked the city around them, their bond grew stronger. No longer was it only kindness keeping them together. It was survival, shared struggle, and something deeper, something that neither drones nor hunters could break. The night felt endless, the city turning into a maze of danger. Daniel and Lyra hid in the narrow passage, their breath sharp, their bodies pressed against the cold wall. But the hunters were not giving up, their shadows stretched across the streets, their machines humming like angry insects in the air. Daniel knew they could not run forever. Sooner or later, they would be cornered. He looked at Lyra, her glowing eyes shimmering with both fear and determination. "We can't keep running," he whispered. "We need to fight, or they'll never stop." Lyra's lips trembled, and she shook her head slowly. Her whole life on Earth had been hiding, surviving, never fighting back. But Daniel's words cut through her fear, reminding her of the strength buried deep inside. "You don't understand," she whispered. "If I use what I carry, everything changes." Daniel leaned closer, his voice steady even though his heart raced. "Then let it change," he said, "because if we do nothing, they'll take you, and I can't let that happen." For a long moment, her glowing eyes searched his, looking for doubt. But all she found was his unwavering resolve. Finally, she closed her eyes and placed her trembling hand on her chest. A faint light began to grow beneath her skin, soft at first, then brighter. Daniel watched in awe as the glow spread through her veins like liquid fire. Her fear had always hidden it, but now her true power was awakening. The hunters appeared at the entrance of the passage, their strange weapons humming. "Stay behind me," Daniel whispered, stepping forward even though he had no weapon. The men raised their devices, but before they could strike, Lyra stepped past him. Her entire body glowed, her silver skin shimmering like starlight, her eyes burning like twin suns. The hunters froze, their faces pale, as the air around them vibrated with raw energy. Lyra raised her hands slowly, and the ground beneath them trembled. The walls of the passage lit with radiant patterns, alien symbols glowing faintly. The drones above screeched as their lights flickered and died, crashing to the ground in sparks. The hunters shouted, trying to steady their weapons, but their devices cracked under the pressure of her power. With one wave of her hand, a pulse of energy burst outward, knocking the men to the ground. Their machines twisted and shattered, as if the world itself had rejected them. Daniel shielded his face from the blinding light, but he did not step away. When the glow finally softened, the alley was silent again. The hunters lay unconscious, their machines nothing more than broken shells. Lyra stood in the center, her body still shimmering faintly, her chest rising and falling as if the power had drained her. Daniel rushed forward, catching her before she collapsed. Her glowing eyes dimmed slightly, but they still held warmth as they met his. "You see," she whispered weakly, "this is why they hunt me." Daniel held her close, shaking his head. "No," he said firmly, "this is why you're special. Not because of what you carry, but because of who you are." Tears welled in her eyes, not from fear this time, but from something else. For the first time, she felt truly seen, not as a weapon, not as a prize, but as herself. The city around them grew quiet once more, the danger fading into the night. But Daniel knew it was not the end. The hunters would come again, stronger, more desperate. Still, he also knew they were no longer running blindly. Now, they had a chance, a bond stronger than fear. He looked down at Lyra, who rested against him, her small hand gripping his jacket tightly. "We'll face whatever comes," he whispered, "together." And in that moment, Lyra smiled faintly, her glowing eyes soft with trust. The girl who once hid in a dumpster, trembling and alone, had found something she never believed possible. A human who chose kindness over fear, courage over safety, and trust over betrayal. Her fate was no longer just survival, it was change. And Daniel's life, once ordinary, had become extraordinary, because in protecting her, in earning her trust, he had changed her world, and perhaps his own, forever.